Ambassador Sarah Chin smoothed her flowing diplomatic robes as the grand chamber doors of the Galactic Council opened before her. The massive crystalline structure stretched impossibly high above, its translucent walls alive with the soft glow of dozens of translation matrices working overtime. Conversations in every imaginable frequency, from the subsonic rumbles of the Karath to the ultrasonic chirps of the Zalarian hive minds, filled the air with an alien symphony. Sarah had walked these halls for 3 years now, carefully crafting humanity's reputation as the galaxy's most dedicated peacemakers. Every gesture, every word, every diplomatic smile had been calculated to reinforce one simple message: humans were gentle, reasonable, and utterly non-threatening. Ah, Ambassador Chin. The familiar chittering voice belonged to Zex Hai, whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's ambient light in fractal patterns. The insectoid delegate from the hive worlds approached with the characteristic head-bobbing motion of his species. Another crisis for the council to address, yes? Though I suspect you'll guide us toward one of your elegant, peaceful resolutions. Sarah's diplomatic mask was flawless, the perfect blend of humble confidence and genuine concern. We always hope diplomacy can prevail, Counselor Zex Hai. Violence should be the last resort of civilized species. The lie came as naturally as breathing now. Behind her serene expression, Sarah catalogued every detail of the chamber's occupants, noting which species seemed nervous, which appeared confident. 3 years of intelligence gathering had taught her that the galaxy's so-called civilized races were remarkably naive about the true nature of power. Today's emergency session centered on the Vorthan Empire's latest atrocity. The reptilian warmongers had steamrolled through the Outer Rim, conquering 3 independent systems in as many months. Their tactics were brutally efficient: orbital bombardment of military targets followed by ground occupation, systematic enslavement of useful populations, and complete resource extraction of viable worlds. Surely the Vorthans can be reasoned with, offered Karath, his crystalline form shifting through worried purple hues. Perhaps economic incentives? Trade agreements? Sarah bit back her disgust at the pathetic display. These creatures had grown soft in their comfortable council chambers, protected by the illusion that civilization could be maintained through endless committee meetings and strongly worded resolutions. The massive chamber doors ground open again, admitting General Thrax himself. The Vorthan delegate was an imposing figure even by his species standards, nearly 3 meters of scarred reptilian muscle encased in ceremonial armor that bore the scorch marks of a dozen conquered worlds. Honored delegates, Thrax's voice carried the unmistakable tone of barely contained violence. My empire grows impatient with these endless debates. 3 weeks after the disastrous council session, Sarah received an encrypted message that made her blood run cold. General Thrax was requesting a private diplomatic meeting, something the Vorthans had never bothered with before. Their usual method of communication involved orbital bombardment followed by surrender demands. The meeting chamber was one of the council's smaller diplomatic suites, its neutral gray walls designed to avoid favoring any particular species' psychological preferences. Sarah arrived punctually, accompanied by Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who maintained his cover as a simple diplomatic aide despite his extensive military intelligence background. Thrax entered like a predator claiming territory, his massive frame filling the doorway before he stalked to the opposite side of the polished conference table. Up close, Sarah could see the intricate scarification covering his scaled hide, each mark representing a world conquered, a species subjugated. The Vorthans wore their brutality like badges of honor. Ambassador Chin, Thrax began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. My empire grows weary of the council's endless bureaucratic delays. We have decided to simplify the decision-making process. Sarah maintained her carefully practiced expression of diplomatic concern, though every instinct screamed danger. How might humanity assist in reaching a mutually beneficial resolution, General? The reptilian's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal, harsh, mechanical, devoid of genuine humor. There will be no negotiations this time, human. The Vorthan Empire is hereby claiming Sector 7 Alpha under our protective jurisdiction. This includes all inhabited systems, space stations, and your pathetic little farming colony on Kepler 442b. New Geneva. Sarah's diplomatic mask almost slipped at the mention of humanity's peaceful agricultural world. 50,000 colonists. Farmers, researchers, teachers, children, living simple lives among the amber wheat fields and crystal-clear lakes of humanity's most successful terraforming project. Surely we can reach some form of diplomatic understanding, Sarah began, playing her role perfectly. No. Thrax's clawed fist slammed against the table, leaving deep gouges in the reinforced surface. "We know about your colony's laughable defenses. A handful of outdated orbital platforms, some antique patrol craft that couldn't stop a cargo hauler. We could reduce your settlement to ash within hours of arrival." He leaned forward, his yellow eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. "Unless, of course, humanity chooses the path of wisdom. Vote to dissolve the Kepler Defense Pact, withdraw all military presence from Sector 7 Alpha, and formally recognize Vorthan sovereignty over the region. You have exactly 72 hours to comply." After Thrax departed, Webb finally spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Ma'am, we can't possibly let them." "Lieutenant," Sarah interrupted, her diplomatic facade finally cracking to reveal something cold and dangerous beneath. "Send a priority flash message to Earth. Tell them the Vorthans just made their first and last mistake." The emergency council session was called within 18 hours of the Vorthan ultimatum becoming public knowledge. Representatives from across the galaxy hurried through the crystalline corridors, their conversations a mixture of fearful whispers and resigned acceptance. The general consensus was clear: humanity would capitulate as they always did. It was simply their nature to avoid confrontation. Ambassador Chen's entrance shattered those expectations completely. Gone were the flowing diplomatic robes that had become her trademark over 3 years of careful image cultivation. Instead, she wore a crisp military-style uniform in deep navy blue, adorned with insignia that few delegates recognized but which carried an unmistakable air of authority. The fabric bore subtle reinforcement patterns, suggesting it was designed for more than ceremonial purposes. Lieutenant Webb followed 2 steps behind, his own transformation equally dramatic. The mild-mannered diplomatic aide had vanished, replaced by an officer whose bearing screamed military intelligence. His uniform displayed the cross-sword insignia of Earth Defense Force Strategic Operations, a branch most aliens had never heard of. The chamber fell into stunned silence as Sarah approached the speaking podium. Her gait was different, purposeful, predatory, like a hunter who had finally decided to reveal her true nature. Even the translation matrices seemed to pause, as if the AI systems themselves were recalibrating to process this fundamental shift. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Chan," announced the elderly Zentran moderator, his voice betraying confusion at the human's dramatic transformation. Sarah stood at the podium, her hands clasped behind her back in a classic military at-ease position. When she spoke, her voice carried a steel that had never been present in 3 years of diplomatic discourse. "Honorable delegates, for 36 months I have represented humanity as a species committed exclusively to peaceful negotiation and diplomatic resolution. This characterization was strategically incomplete." Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly like waves through disturbed water. Several delegates leaned forward in their specialized seating, compound eyes and sensory organs focusing intently on the transformed human. "Humanity does indeed value peace above all else," Sarah continued, her tone growing colder with each word, "but we have learned through bitter historical experience that lasting peace can only be maintained by those who possess the strength to defend it. The Vorthan Empire has committed a catastrophic error in judgment." General Thrax rose from his designated seating area, his massive frame casting shadows across nearby delegates. "Empty posturing, human. Your colony possesses no defenses worth the name. In 48 hours, New Geneva will fly Vorthan banners, and your peace-loving species will do absolutely nothing to prevent it." Sarah's smile was razor-sharp, predatory in a way that made several nearby delegates unconsciously shift away from her. "General Thrax, allow me to introduce you to an ancient human philosophical concept." Admiral Carlos Martinez stood in the command center of the EDF Indomitable, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he studied the three-dimensional tactical hologram floating before him. 24 hours had passed since humanity's ultimatum, and General Thrax had responded exactly as predicted, with overwhelming force and absolute arrogance. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, Admiral," reported Commander Lu from her tactical station, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. 60 Vorthan vessels dropping out of hyperspace in standard battle formation. They're broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. Martinez watched the enemy fleet materialize on his display, massive dreadnoughts leading the charge, their hulls scarred from a dozen conquered worlds, flanked by heavy cruisers and swarms of assault frigates. It was an armada that had never known defeat, commanded by generals who viewed warfare as simple mathematics. Bigger fleet equals victory. Patch me through to their flagship, Martinez ordered, his tone carrying the calm authority of someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of controlled violence. The main display shimmered, revealing General Thrax on the bridge of his command vessel. Behind the Vorthan leader, Martinez could see the typical setup of their species' military hierarchy: rigid, hierarchical, predictable. Admiral Martinez. Thrax's voice dripped with condescending confidence. You still have time to withdraw with whatever passes for honor among your kind. My fleet has reduced civilizations older than yours to radioactive debris. This is your final opportunity for a bloodless surrender. Martinez studied his opponent with the calculating gaze of a professional soldier. Thrax was exactly what Earth's military analysts had predicted, a competent but conventional commander who had never faced an enemy with equivalent technology and tactical sophistication. General, Martinez replied with unnerving calm, allow me to share something about human military doctrine. We've spent 3 millennia perfecting warfare against opponents who were just as intelligent, just as ruthless, and just as well-equipped as ourselves. What you're about to experience represents the evolutionary endpoint of that development. Enough speeches. All vessels, attack formation. Show these mammals what true warfare looks like. Martinez turned to his tactical officer, his expression shifting from diplomatic courtesy to predatory focus. Commander Liu, implement Protocol 77 Alpha. All ships weapons free. Let's show them why Earth stopped fighting itself. What followed would be dissected in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The human fleet didn't meet the Vorthan charge head-on as every tactical manual suggested. Instead, they seemed to dissolve into chaos, individual ships breaking formation and scattering like frightened prey. To Thrax, it appeared to be exactly what he'd expected: cowardly retreat. They flee like the weak creatures they are. Thrax laughed triumphantly. Press the attack. Show them no mercy. But Admiral Martinez understood something the Vorthan general didn't. Sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemy think they're winning. The news of the Vorthan defeat spread through the galaxy's communication networks like a quantum shockwave, reaching every inhabited system within hours. In the Galactic Council chambers, an unprecedented emergency session was called as representatives from 43 species struggled to process the impossible reality that had just unfolded. The peaceful humans had not only defeated the Vorthans, they had utterly annihilated them. Ambassador Chin stood before the assembly, her military uniform now making perfect sense to the stunned delegates. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the tactical breakdown of the engagement, every maneuver, every strategy, every calculated decision that had led to humanity's devastating victory. The battle had lasted exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. 47 Vorthan vessels destroyed or disabled. Human casualties, 2 frigates, 138 personnel. Honorable delegates, Sarah began, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate through the crystalline walls themselves. I believe some clarification is warranted regarding humanity's actual military capabilities and strategic doctrine. Counselor Zexhi's compound eyes flickered rapidly between infrared and visible spectrums, a clear sign of extreme agitation among his species. Ambassador Chin, we had absolutely no comprehension that humans possessed such advanced military technology. Your vessels, your tactical coordination, your weapon systems were developed and refined over the course of human civilization, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. You must understand that most species represented in this council achieved interstellar flight after establishing global unity and planetary peace. Humanity reached the stars while still fragmented into competing nation-states, ideological blocs, and resource-driven alliances. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a timeline of human military evolution, from ancient battlefield tactics to space-based warfare. We spent over 3,000 years perfecting the science of warfare against opponents with equivalent technology, intelligence, and motivation. Every strategy you witness today was tested in conflicts where failure meant extinction. The silicon-based Karath shifted nervously, his crystalline structure reflecting worried amber frequencies. But your diplomatic conduct over these past years, you consistently advocated for peaceful resolution, mediation, compromise, was entirely genuine, Sarah assured him, though her tone remained firm. We actively prefer peaceful solutions because we understand the true cost of warfare better than any species in this council. We have witnessed what happens when civilizations turn their complete military capacity against equally capable opponents. A commotion erupted from the prisoner viewing section as General Thrax, now wearing the restraint collar of a war criminal, was granted permission to address the assembly. "You deceived us all," he accused, his voice hoarse from injuries sustained during his flagship's capture. "For years, you deliberately projected weakness, vulnerability, pacifism." Sarah turned to face her former adversary directly. "General, we never once lied about our fundamental preferences or values. We simply chose not to advertise capabilities that we hoped would never be necessary to demonstrate." 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the Galactic Council convened for what historians would later call the most significant session in galactic civilization's recorded history. The Great Chamber had been completely reconfigured with new seating arrangements that reflected the dramatically altered political landscape. Humanity, once relegated to minor advisory roles and ceremonial peacekeeping positions, now occupied the prestigious central platform typically reserved for ancient elder species with millennia of diplomatic experience. Ambassador Chin, now bearing the formal title of Senior Ambassador and Director of Human Galactic Affairs, reviewed her comprehensive notes as delegates from across the galaxy filed into their designated positions. The transformation had been remarkable. Species that had barely acknowledged human existence 6 months ago were now actively seeking protective alliances and military cooperation agreements. The elderly Zentran moderator called the session to order with obvious nervousness, his normally steady voice betraying the magnitude of what they were about to discuss. "We gather today to address Resolution 2157, the Galactic Security Compact, proposed by the human delegation." Sarah rose from her position, her presence immediately commanding the absolute attention of every delegate in the chamber. The soft murmur of translation matrices working overtime was the only sound as dozens of species focused their various sensory organs on the transformed human representative. "Honorable delegates, the events of recent months have forced every civilized species to fundamentally reconsider our collective approach to galactic security and interspecies cooperation. The previous system, hoping that aggressive species would voluntarily limit their territorial ambitions, has proven catastrophically inadequate." Waves of agreement rippled through the assembly, manifesting as color changes in crystalline species, pheromone releases from insectoids, and electromagnetic fluctuations from energy-based life forms. Humanity therefore proposes the formation of a comprehensive mutual defense alliance, Sarah continued, activating a holographic display that showed proposed fleet coordination patterns. Not to conquer or intimidate weaker species, but to ensure that no civilization need fear extinction at the hands of aggressive neighbors. Counselor Zexhi's compound eyes focused with laser-like intensity. "And humanity would assume command of this alliance?" "Jointly coordinated," Sarah corrected firmly. "Military leadership would be distributed among species based on proven expertise and strategic capabilities. The Thraxians excel at fleet logistics and supply chain management. The Keepers are acknowledged masters of defensive strategy and fortification. The Luminari provide unparalleled intelligence gathering and reconnaissance capabilities. Each member species contributes what they do best." From the designated prisoner section, General Thrax was granted permission to address the assembly. His time in human custody had been profoundly educational and humbling. "Delegates," he began, his voice lacking any trace of its former arrogance, "I have spent 6 months observing human military doctrine, political philosophy, and treatment of prisoners. They do not conquer for conquest's sake, they do not enslave for profit, they do not destroy for pleasure." 10 years after the Battle of Kepler 442, Grand Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the panoramic observation deck of the GSA Harmony, humanity's most advanced diplomatic vessel. Watching through reinforced transparent aluminum as representatives from 67 species conducted synchronized military exercises in the space surrounding Nexus Station. The sight still filled her with quiet amazement, former enemies flying in perfect formation, their weapon systems powered down, their crews working together with seamless coordination. The galaxy had transformed beyond anyone's wildest imagination. The Security Compact had evolved into something far greater than a simple military alliance. It had become the foundation of the first truly unified galactic civilization based on mutual respect, shared defense, and voluntary cooperation rather than conquest and subjugation. Admiral, called Captain Elena Torres from the bridge, her voice carrying the respectful tone reserved for priority communications. We're receiving a transmission from Earth marked as Historical Significance Level 1. Sarah made her way to the command center, curiosity piqued by the unusual classification. The main display activated, showing President Carlos Martinez, the former fleet admiral, had successfully transitioned to political leadership after his legendary military victory had made him a hero across human space. Sarah, he began, his weathered face bearing a satisfied smile. Congratulations on reaching this milestone. The Galactic Archaeological Society has just made an announcement that I thought you should hear directly. The display switched to show Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's leading xenoarchaeologist, standing before massive ancient ruins on a distant world, her excavation team working carefully among stone monuments that predated known galactic civilization. After 2 decades of comprehensive research across 17 archaeological sites, Dr. Vasquez announced, "We have discovered conclusive evidence that our galaxy has experienced this exact cycle before. Every 30,000 years, aggressive species emerge and threaten the stability of galactic civilization." The camera panned across inscriptions carved in dozens of dead languages, all telling variations of the same tragic story: civilizations that rose to greatness only to fall when they couldn't overcome their fundamental differences, leaving only ruins and warnings for future generations. However, Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice filled with scholarly excitement, the current alliance structure represents something completely unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time in millions of years, species have united not because they were forced to by external threats, but because they chose to embrace cooperation over competition. Back aboard the Harmony, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. From humanity's careful diplomatic deception to their explosive military revelation, from the shock of their combat capabilities to the gradual understanding that true strength came from protection rather than domination. Commander Webb, now her chief of staff, approached with intelligence briefings. "Admiral, the last independent aggressive species in the Outer Rim has formally requested alliance membership. The Void Hunters have abandoned their raiding lifestyle in exchange for collective security." Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the pattern that had repeated itself countless times. The long peace had truly begun.